Hey everybody, we're catching the end of Led Zeppelin on 92.3 The Fox while we wait for everybody to join us. Jack,
Led Zeppelin, all classics, 92.
Thank God it's Friday. Agree with you. We're about to get the traffic report in El Paso in case you all are interested.
Pebble Hills at Royal Woods, there's an accident there. We're going to keep an eye out for the...
Watch out on the east side, Pebble Hills and Royal Woods. Skylar, Tim, Celeste, good to see everybody. Really good show today. We're going to have Congressman Eric Swalwell, who I believe is freshly returned from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where he just voted on a massive spending program. It's $484 billion. It's the latest relief bill intended to keep this economic disaster that we are experiencing from getting any worse. And it's supposed to get to people and to small businesses. We're going to ask him if it really will, what he likes about what's in the bill, what he wishes were in it, what he would take out if he could, and why he voted for it. I think only 5 members of Congress voted against it, and the president is expected to sign it if he hasn't signed it already. So Eric Swalwell coming up. He's also a member of the Judiciary and the House Intelligence Committee, so maybe he can tell us a little bit about what's going on, if anything, on those 2 committees right now. And then, special treat, this wasn't advertised, but I reached out to Mike Stevens from the Moxie Cinema, and he's going to provide us with some recommendations for the weekend, what we should be watching, and we'll answer your questions as well. So there's a little question button at the bottom. If you want to ask a question of Eric Swalwell, go ahead and ask that question now. I'll call upon you if the question is germane to the conversation that we're having. Hope that everyone's having a great Friday. I'm going to post the Powered by People link. If you want to help our food banks out here in Texas, that link is now pinned right at the bottom of your screen. PSA, do not drink bleach. Do not inject disinfectants into your veins. Don't try to put sunlight into your body, whatever that means and however you might do that. Perfectly fine to walk outside and enjoy some sun. Wear a mask in those municipalities where it's required. Keep 6-foot distance. Go out and get some sunshine, but don't do anything that the president asked you to do yesterday. I think it's really important that everybody clarify that. I think when he was trying to sell everybody on the last wonder drug that turns out in a trial conducted with veterans, more veterans who took that drug did more poorly than those who didn't. Somebody I read drank fishbowl cleaner because it had hydrochloroquine in it, and they thought it was going to save them, and they became very sick and maybe even worse. Do not put bleach into your system. 878,000 plus Americans now infected. In fact, let's turn to Elizabeth and get the numbers for you. 884,000, more than 50,000 deaths in the United States, still under 5 million tests in a country of 327 million people. A little over 1% of America has been tested so far. Unconscionable and inexcusable and absolutely unforgivable in the face of the greatest pandemic the world has ever seen, from the wealthiest, the most powerful, the most technologically advanced country on planet Earth. In Texas, 23,000 cases. Now a little more than 600 of our fellow Texans have died that we know of, and I have to caveat that number because we have tested less people per capita in Texas than any other state in the union. Again, unforgivable, and something for which the governor and those in power today in Texas will have to answer for. Let's make sure that we get the tests, the PPE, the ventilators for those communities that are struggling to provide for everyone who has become infected and is struggling in the fight against COVID-19. A complete disaster on the part of this administration, but we keep pointing to our heroes who are out there, whether it's Jacqueline and Project PPE that's making PPE, whether it's Dr. Gilman, our New York City emergency room doctor that we've had on the show twice, who is saving lives on a daily basis and testifying to us just what that looks like to try to create the urgency for us to improve conditions for hospitals across this country. Chef Jose Andres, who we had on the other day, who's talking about feeding people at a time of record food insecurity where you have lines that stretch miles long to be able to pick up a week's worth of groceries to feed yourself and your families. 26 million people out of work right now, and there are a lot of folks who are trying to help them out. But by any reckoning, by any measure, this is the greatest disaster that we have seen in this country, and it wasn't inevitable. There were decisions that were made, there were decisions that were not made over the last 3 months that have brought us to this point. But we still have a chance to fight this. We still have a chance to save lives, tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives by the actions and decisions that we take. So stay inside, wash your hands vigorously. When you're outside, wear a mask, wear gloves, do not come within 6 feet of anyone else. If you care about those frontline healthcare workers, if you care about the frontline workers at our supermarkets and food banks, then do them a favor and stay inside and don't get them sick. Last thing, you've heard me talk about and you've seen me tweet about my reaction to the president's executive order on immigration, trying to stop immigration into the United States, talking about what does he call it, the secret enemy or the invisible enemy that's coming into this country. And we've been talking about whether it's your food, whether it's the healthcare workers, whether it's those who are going to come up with the next round of innovations to come up with vaccines or cures for COVID-19. Good chance that we're going to depend on immigrants. So this is incredibly short-sighted and self-defeating for this country. We read in the Washington Post today that Trump's chief advisor on all issues immigration, Stephen Miller, told VIPs on a phone call last night that this is really part of a long-term plan to shut down immigration into the United States. So please watch that. And please get in touch with your member of Congress, your U.S. Senator. Let them know how you feel about this. All right. Eric Swalwell is in his 4th term in the United States Congress, representing the 15th Congressional District in California. We're going to have him tell us about what that district encompasses. He sits on the House Intelligence and the House Judiciary Committees, and I believe he's just come back from voting on this historic relief bill that just passed the House yesterday. So I'm going to see if I can bring up Congressman Eric Swalwell. Looks like our list.
Or at your local office.
All right, here he comes, folks. If you have a question, hit the little question box at the bottom of the screen and you can ask it home. Eric.
Hey, buddy.
How are you doing?
I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. I miss you too, but I've been seeing you on social media and on TV, and you're doing a great job out there. Thank you.
And of course, I think we had good preparation for this. I think it was back in 2016 when we led the sit-in. At least we led the IT part of the sit-in on the House floor, and you were standing up basically a local cable news station on the House floor, and it's prepared us for this moment, I guess, to broadcast in a quarantine.
That's right. I remember that John Lewis asked us to join him for a protest, a demonstration on the House floor. And at first I wasn't totally sure what it was about, but who am I to refuse John Lewis anything that he asks? And it turned out it was the best possible fight for us to engage in. We were trying to get then Speaker, who was, it wasn't Boehner at the time, it was, or was it?
Paul Ryan, my wife Brittany says hi. Brittany.
Hey, Brittany. So is Ryan or Boehner, but they had shut off. Yo, how are you?
Hi,
Yes,
Beto.
Good to see you.
I'm doing well.
Oh, good.
Good to see you. We miss you.
Yeah, likewise.
But yeah, asked us to turn on. It was Paul Ryan. He cut
it was
the
Paul
C-SPAN.
Ryan. That's right. And we were trying to address the fact that 100 of our fellow Americans die every day to gun violence, and the Congress under Republican majority leadership had done nothing about it. And they, in fact, shut down the C-SPAN cameras so that we could not tell the story of gun violence in America. But John Lewis organized all of us to actually occupy the House floor. And though the C-SPAN cameras were turned off, you and I, Scott Peters, others, transmitted from our phones so that our constituents and people all over the country could see that. And good ending to this story, you led the effort in the House with others to actually pass background checks this past year. So congratulations on getting that done.
Thank you. And this has been the most momentous time for ending gun violence. The new majority that we have in the House of Representatives. You know, we had obviously that sit-in, if you remember, that was right after Pulse and John Lewis. He called us into the caucus and said, if you're willing to be a little patient, a little bit uncomfortable, we can cause some good trouble. And sadly, you know, after 26 hours, and leaving the floor. We didn't see the Republicans do much, and then there would be more and more death. But it was really post Parkland when you saw communities that had always been ravaged by gun violence and never had their stories told, and then the mass shooting communities from Santa Fe to Parkland and everywhere in between converged at the ballot box. And yeah, we passed background checks, and I do think that gun safety is on the ballot this November.
When did you get back from DC? You had to fly out. First of all, tell us what it was like to fly out there. Was anybody else?
I'm in DC now. We're
you're in DC
right now. Yeah. So we've got Nelson and Cricket, 2 years old and 1 year old. So I've stood up a startup preschool right now until I can get home. Our daughter has respiratory issues, so I'm not going to fly back and forth until it's safe. I don't want to expose her unnecessarily. She's been in the ICU before for what's called RSV. So we're taking precaution, and we have a family member of my wife's who lives with us, and she's in the demographic that you cannot expose, and so we're just taking precautions, eager to get back home. But we had an intel briefing yesterday before the vote, and we go into this small skiff, not too big of a room, and every member on the Democratic side, we're all wearing masks. We're sitting 6 feet apart. And if you would have taken a picture of that and went back in time and showed me it just a month ago, I would have said, there's no way. Like, this is a made up internet picture. Like, there's no way that this is happening. Right. But that's the new scene. And then when we voted yesterday, we were voting essentially about 24 people at a time in 10-minute blocks. And the floor, you essentially could not sit down. You had to go in, vote, and leave. These are the times that are testing us, and we'll get through it.
Let me ask you this, Eric. So one of the things that I share with people about my time in Congress is, there's the official stuff that you see on TV and on C-SPAN, the debates, the speeches, you see your member of Congress voting on the floor. And that's part of the work of being a member of Congress. But so much of what actually ends up being effective are the sidebar conversations that you have on the floor. You go over and you introduce yourself to another member, maybe of another party, and you say, hey, I'm working on this bill to address PTSD treatment for veterans, and I know your district's really been struggling with that. Would you join me on this legislation? And you develop trust and a relationship. I'm assuming that's close to impossible to do right now. Were you able to have any conversations on the floor with your colleagues?
I ran into Rodney Davis, if you remember. He was in our class of 2012. And I asked him to join me next week with Chef Jose Andres, just as you're doing. Chef Andres is trying to, as he talked about with you this week, raise awareness about how this is impacting restaurants, but how restaurants could serve the food insecurity needs. So Chef Rodney and I are going to do a Zoom Facebook Live, but it was not as easy as it's been in the past just because of the distancing issues. And so I've, since I've gone to Congress, been trying to find ways for us to innovate the way we work with each other and communicate to our constituents. And I wrote in 2013 legislation that would allow remote voting, and anticipated that there may be a time when we could not convene. And we're moving toward that now. We're getting a lot closer to being able to do that. But it's really hard to meet just once a month and see that as and pass $1 trillion packages, once a month, and then leave and not really have the ability to talk it out, ask questions. That we can't do that forever. And I think the speaker is moving toward, giving us remote capabilities.
All right, I'm going to allow people to ask questions. A lot of folks on, and a lot of people excited that you're here. One question, though, just to kind of lay the groundwork. You just voted on this $484 billion relief package. Why did you vote for it? What did you like that was in it? What did you wish had been in it? And what was in it that you kind of had to hold your nose and accept as part of the larger deal?
Yeah, the 3 T's was most important to me. Testing, tracing, and treatment. So giving $100 billion more to hospitals to increase their ability to test, to treat, and to trace patients. And as bad as the financial crisis is, we're a resilient country. As you pointed out in the beginning, we are the greatest, most innovative country in the world. I believe we will come out of this financially, but we have to take care of our health first and the people on the front lines. And the best way to solve the financial crisis is to first solve the healthcare crisis. And the part I did not like was there was not enough money going to the small businesses that need it the most. We're starting to see some of the abuses, businesses that don't necessarily need the money taking it, banks prioritizing businesses that had a pre-existing lending relationship, but other good customers with good credit and a lot of employees affected were at the back of the line. We added 60 billion more for minority-owned businesses, for rural businesses, for women-owned businesses. That was great, but I would really like to see us continue to make sure the money goes to the small businesses that need it the most. And then, Beto, because we're only meeting about once a month in person, I think we missed an opportunity to also throw in their aid that state and local governments are asking for on top of what we gave them in the last package, and also to fully fund 100% mail-in voting this upcoming election. There's no reason to risk exposing people if this thing rebounds, especially learning that at least a dozen people in Wisconsin were exposed to COVID-19 when they unnecessarily had to go out and vote. We should fund the ability for the states to do that.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to ask a couple of questions or post a couple of questions that folks have asked. Our advice is if you can get your head to the top of the screen so that your face is not obscured by the question, that way everyone can see you. So Hayden asked, there you go. Do you have an opinion about governors reopening their states? A little confusion. Governor Kemp in Georgia, despite the mayor of Atlanta, the largest city in his state, who argues to the contrary, is talking about, or not just talking about, is going to reopen the state for tanning salons and other seemingly non-essential businesses. There are these AstroTurf protests funded by far-right organizations on state house steps throughout the country. What are your thoughts on this?
Follow the science, and there's not one size fits all solution. Montana should be treated differently than New York in New York City, but every state should follow the science. And I think what we're missing right now is leadership from the president, where it's clear that if you're not opening up fast enough, he's going to come down on you and call you out. But if you open too fast, he's just going to say, well, I don't like it, but he's not going to actually stop Kemp in Georgia from doing that, where it looks like he would try and force a state to open up faster than they would like. So I think following the science is the best thing we can do, and give people hope. Tell them what the mile markers are. What do we have to have? How many tests? How many hospitalization cases have to come down? How many days in a row? So we can track the data and then tell us, what does it look like when we hit those points? Well, restaurants are open, but at limited capacity. Non-essential workplaces are open, but people are wearing masks and they're physically distancing themselves. The Bay Area, we're talking about this right now. Are we going to put travel restrictions in place on people coming from states that have not yet got it under control? But just give people hope, and that, right now it's every governor for themselves, because we don't have a president who can provide that leadership.
We have a question about oversight for PPP. So we've been hearing all these horror stories from Shake Shack and 10 million to AutoNation getting $95 million. Was there ability to implement some oversight to keep those who should not be receiving this public money from getting it, and then ensuring those small businesses who really need it, it'll be their life or death, make sure that they get it?
Yep. The bill we passed immediately before passing the reloading of the Paycheck Protection Program yesterday was to create a select committee to do this oversight, to make sure the money is spent wisely. Also, it was the transparency requirements we put in place in the last round for the Paycheck Protection Program that even shined a light on companies like Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris getting this. We required that it had to be publicly released by taxpayer identification number, any company that took the money. And it's going to take vigorous oversight to make sure the money is spent well. We also put in place an Inspector General to monitor any money the Treasury is able to loan on its own. So we've learned a lot since the 2008 bailout, where it really benefited Wall Street but not Main Street.
Very specific question. Will disabled people whose sole income is SSI receive anything from the relief bills?
Well, certainly you will receive the stimulus check, and you should, if you're not already getting a direct deposit, you can go to the IRS portal and receive that. Give them your Social Security number. That's how they're tracking those benefits. But I also believe we have to continue to fund through the Community Development Block Grant, which we put a lot of money into in the last CARES Act relief package, to help those most in need in our community, whether it's Meals on Wheels programs, whether it's senior living facilities, whether it's giving people secure shelter. We have to keep looking out for those most vulnerable and most affected by COVID-19.
Here's a question that I think a lot of people are wondering about. Let me see if I can find it again. Essentially, it is, here you go. Hey, Eric, what's up with the beard? P.S. Thank you for doing what you do during this difficult time. Is this a response to being at home with family?
Yeah, and so is the T-shirt, right? I put on the suit yesterday to go vote, and I had two thoughts. One thought was, is there a YouTube link to show me how to tie a tie? And the second, it was just thinking about all the people who would love to put on a suit and go to work and can't right now, or lost their job, and that weighs on me a lot. I mean, people, they want to work, but they want to go back to work when it's safe. So yeah, for me, it's mostly just reflective of these trying times. I think my daughter, who's one who won't kiss me anymore, is going to ultimately prevail in getting it to go. Right.
Let me ask you, there are a number of questions, and I'll just paraphrase them and add a little commentary on this as I ask you. A lot of questions about gun violence and gun sense legislation and specific proposals that you've made. And I believe you are one of, if not the first members of Congress, at least that I knew of, not only to propose a mandatory buyback of AR-15s and AK-47s and assault weapons. In other words, weapons that were designed and engineered and sold basically originally to U.S. militaries because they're really good at killing people very efficiently and very effectively. And it was so bold and so beyond what was possible politically, or at least that was the conventional wisdom for so long. And over time, it's really become part of the conversation in the country. Obviously not universally popular, but when you see a mandatory buyback getting relatively close to 50% in Texas, of all places, you know that you have helped to advance the conversation. Can you talk about how you arrived at that conclusion, and then what you think the prospects are for mandatory buyback legislation?
Beto, it started when I was a prosecutor, and one of the homicide cases I prosecuted, the victim, he was killed by an assault rifle, and he was hit just once. And I remember looking at the autopsy photo, and he was hit in the back of the thigh, and wondering, like, how did he die from a shot to the back of the thigh? And his mom wondered the same thing, and she asked me, like, I don't get it. If you're going to get shot, you'd want to be shot in the leg or the arm. And I remember the autopsy doctor telling me and telling the jury that because of the velocity of the round, he didn't stand a chance. He was fired at over 40 times and hit just once, which showed me that you can take a high-powered weapon, put it in the hands of somebody with no experience at all at firing a gun, and just hitting the person once with the speed of the rounds and how many rounds you can get off in a short amount of time leaves almost no chance. And that always weighed on me. And, I'm someone who grew up the son of a police officer. My dad and brothers are cops, and they carry guns and they hunt. And always thought we can have a Second Amendment and still keep dangerous weapons from dangerous people. But it was after Parkland where I really started to think, how can we regulate this weapon, even through a background check, even through other reasonable limitations, that it just seems that they were still getting into the hands of people and causing mass carnage. And I just looked to what Australia had done many years ago after just one mass shooting. And they had not just a ban, but a buyback. And it was about 700,000 weapons they took off the streets. They've had nothing similar since. So I was just convinced that some weapons just do not belong anywhere in our society. Now, in my legislation, we were the first to write it. I know it's not going to be popular at first, but I think like many movements, and you took this issue up to your credit and gave it a voice that I was not able to give it, that we are reaching a point where the dam is going to break. But I did carve out an exception for law enforcement. I don't want them to be outgunned either. And I worry about my brothers who are on the streets that, they don't have the best weapons on the streets right now. If you have these weapons out there. So that's how I arrived at it. And is it going to be, and you didn't envision this and I didn't envision this, cops and military rounding up these guns. No, just like anything that's banned, whether it's, say bomb making materials or anything else, we're not going door to door to see if you have bomb making materials. But if you get a warrant and you go into someone's house and they have it, then they can be charged with the crime for having it. And I think you have to have some faith in the American people, be law abiding and have them bought back.
Absolutely. Have some faith in this country and our ability to make progress on even a very tough issue like this one. Let me ask you about one more dynamic connected to this. So obviously what happened in El Paso in August of last year, where 22 were killed by a guy who was inspired in part by President Trump to kill immigrants or those who he thought looked like immigrants. You mentioned the shootings in Santa Fe, in Parkland, in Midland, Odessa, in Sutherland Springs, just to name a few more in Texas and one in Florida. But this dynamic now of these guys dressed for battle on the steps of the state house or the courthouse with face masks completely obscuring their faces, with armor and military style weapons, and they're not just out there quote unquote protesting for quote unquote gun rights. They're out there protesting against stay-at-home orders. They're protesting this or that issue. Where are we going with this level of threatened political violence to achieve a political outcome? It comes very close to a definition that I have of terrorism, that you use force or violence or the threat of violence to achieve a political end. What do you think of when you see these protests in Michigan or in other states right now related to the legislation that you introduced?
There's more of us than there are of them. And that, don't doubt how much, a mother cares about protecting her children when they go to school, how much a father cares. And when we go to the ballot box on this issue, you're going to continue to see that we may not, take our, AR-15s with us to the ballot box, but we're going to go in more forceful numbers. And for the first time ever in America, in the last election in 2018, more money was spent by groups seeking to end gun violence than groups seeking to advocate looser gun control laws. And so I think the momentum is with us. I think the fact that they do that is only, as you said, to intimidate and to make themselves appear to have more support behind them than they really do. And I'm not intimidated, but more importantly, the moms aren't intimidated. And in Virginia, when they tried to do this a couple months ago, after we got a majority in the Virginia legislature, they weren't intimidated. The legislators that came there under the force of ending gun violence, they voted to pass background checks.
I think that I just saw Shannon Watts of Moms Demand Action on here, helping to guide the conversation through the comments. And you mentioned the frustration that we all had as members of Congress, not being able to make progress, not even having a debate, not even holding a vote. Like, what the fuck are we scared of as the world's greatest democracy to have a debate or a vote on something like gun violence? And yet, as you said, we all got busy winning the next elections. And it was members of Congress, it was candidates for Congress, but it was also those activists in Moms Demand Action and March for Our Lives and other advocacy organizations, Giffords and Brady. It's really exciting to me to see Moms Demand have more members than the NRA. And so your point about there are more of us than there are of the AR-toting separatists on the courthouse steps, that's got to be somewhat reassuring, even though those pictures are a little bit distressing, right? That just doesn't look like America to have people threatening legislators with guns right now. Well, I've got to say, I had a chance to serve with you for 3 terms. So proud of the work that you're doing right now. We didn't even get to touch your work on the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees, but just know that we are grateful. And I can tell from all the love that you're getting that your constituents are grateful, and the national audience that you have is grateful. So thank you for doing this work, and I hope that you'll join us again.
Thanks for running. Thanks for making these issues, and elevating them to where they are. And best to Amy, Ulysses, Henry and Molly and the family.
Likewise, man. Stay safe.
All right.
Adios.
See you, buddy.
All right. That was Eric Swalwell. We came into Congress at the same time, and I was reading his biography today. I think he's 39 years old, which is nuts. So how old was Eric when he first came in? Is that possible? But so accomplished, such a great voice, not just for Democrats, but for common sense. And I often see him on clips on Twitter from cable TV, going out there into the public arena and making the argument and then fighting to actually get it done and accomplished. All right. I promised you we were going to get Mike Stevens for a little bit. Mike Stevens of the Moxie Cinema in Springfield, Missouri, who came up with some great recommendations last time we had him on. I figured it's Friday. We're getting ready for the weekend. We need to know what we should be watching right now. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. Great to see you, man. That was fun to see Eric.
He's so good, and he's so good at explaining in terms that I and most people can understand about why something's important or what the path is to actually get the change accomplished. Let me ask you. So I'm on your mailing list for the Moxie, and you were touting a movie called Fantastic Fungi. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep, I think you are. Plural.
And it is a fascinating documentary on mushrooms and the category of living things that mushrooms are a part of. I don't know what they're called. It was absolutely beautiful and not something I would have otherwise watched. You know, I wasn't looking for a documentary on mushrooms. I do have to tell you that one of my kids, who will remain unnamed, when the documentary got to the section on magic mushrooms, said, I want to do that when I grow up. And Amy shot me this look of just like, fuck you, Beto. What were you thinking putting this movie on?
She texted me. She texted me that night.
She did?
Saying, thanks, Mike.
What rare gems have you unearthed recently, like that movie, which was excellent, that we should think about watching this weekend? We've got a lot of time on our hands, Saturday and Sunday. What do we need to know about?
Well, politically, I think, like, if you're on the same thing, we're streaming. So we have those virtual screening rooms, and we're going to be showing Slay the Dragon, which I don't know if you mentioned because my stream was a little bit.
I haven't mentioned it, but this is about gerrymandering, right?
Yeah. And I caught it this afternoon. I mean, it's infuriating, but it's totally informative. And in the way, like, I remember reading all those articles in 2009 in the Times and up like in the Wisconsin House and Michigan, the fight there, but like seeing it all collected and seeing like this long-term strategic goal that people had and that they carried through on that was been so successful was very illuminating and also that people are responding and reacting to it and fighting back.
Does it talk about gerrymandering as a form of voter suppression and specifically racial suppression, keeping Black voters from going to the polls?
Yeah, they talk about that. And then also after you've gerrymandered a district, you can start enacting voter suppression laws like voter ID laws and all sorts of other things because you no longer have to worry about holding your seat. You're pretty much guaranteed you're going to hang on to your seat.
You probably know this because I talked about it nonstop in the campaign, but Texas is one of, if not the most gerrymandered states in the union. And there's a very pernicious racial dynamic to it where Republicans in charge in the state legislature basically drew you out of a congressional district based on the color of your skin, trying to disperse the influence of Black voters and concentrate the power of white voters. And they were able to do so very successfully to their ends. And not just me saying it, federal courts have said that. And if you've been following Texas, our attorney general now is trying to force in-person voting this July for our runoff elections, though we know that in-person voting is very dangerous and you run the risk of contracting coronavirus, again, probably an attempt to suppress voter turnout. So this is one that I want to watch. Say the name again. Is it Slay the Dragon?
Slay the Dragon. It's streaming, available now online.
Cool. And then let me run this experiment. I just thought of this, Mike. What if everyone on the comments just types in what they're watching right now, And Mike, you comment if you can in real time as he comes. So you're gonna have like 3 seconds per show coming in. I'm putting mine in right there. I don't know if you saw that. Takes a while.
Last Emperor, a deep cut.
Goliath.
Babylon Berlin. I see. That's on my list. I haven't seen it yet. Goliath, the Italian. Oh man, just finished Letterkenny. I haven't seen that. Mrs. America is great. You got a name drop in that, didn't you? Green Book.
Is that
Taylor Swift?
Yep.
Breaking Bad. I see. Breaking Bad happened right after we had kids, so like we missed it. Our last binge was The Wire and The Sopranos. Knives Out is so good. What a great director he is. And The Last Dance. So The Last Dance is the Martin Scorsese doc about the band. And
no.
Oh wait, I'm confusing things.
The Last Waltz is Scorsese
Waltz,
on the band.
Right.
The Last Dance is ESPN on Michael Jordan.
Oh, the Michael Jordan one.
And 97 Bulls. Mike, we watched an episode and a half of The Last Dance. It is so good. It is so well done. You and I were living together in Brooklyn at the time that season was playing out, the 96-97 season.
And of course, we met in basketball camp.
And we met at the Don Haskins basketball camp in El Paso. Jordans. Yeah, both of us heavily recruited in middle school, and just professional careers did not turn out. Okay, Rocio is saying she needs recommendations. So you've offered to Slay the Dragon. What else do we need to be known about?
So these are all streaming on Netflix right now, and kind of an array. So you've seen this, Beto, I think. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Like, if you have kids, obviously you've seen this, or you should see it. But like, even as an adult, like, I saw it and was blown away. Like, I saw it in the theater, and it's one of the few movies that year I wanted to see again and did in the theater. Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers movie that came out.
I haven't seen that one.
I just rewatched it this week. George Clooney's in it. Really fun. It's about kind of you should just watch it. I love the Coen Brothers. Crypt Camp is a Netflix doc I think it's the first one from the Obama production kind of deal. And I saw that at the True False Film Festival. And, it's about the disability rights movement, but it's also like told through this very narrow, so there was a camp in upstate New York where people with disabilities would go for the summer and were able to be together. And it was kind of in the age of Summer of Love, hippie. And so they had the same free-spirited, kind of crazy, wild energy. And also everybody was disabled and being on their own, away from their parents or their caregivers for the first time with these counselors. Super inspiring and interesting, and makes you realize that change happens by, these personal stories, these connections of people that have known each other forever.
You know who turned me onto that movie, although I haven't watched it yet, is Lisa Flores. Was organizing a Netflix watch party for Crypt Camp.
It's really good. Then if you want just a straight up action kind of movie to forget about stuff, there's a Steven Soderbergh movie called Haywire that is really kinetic fight scenes. So it's a lot of physical violence. So if you're not into that, no go. But it's a MMA fighter that he hired to act in it, and she's fantastic. And it's just the scenes are crazy. You're like, this, because there's no cuts. It's just continually action. So it's called Haywire. Steven Soderbergh is fantastic. Also, Drive is available right now, which is one of my favorite kind of thrillers of recent memory.
There's a Jack DePremio question that I've got to ask you. Well, two questions.
Somebody knew her. Gina Carano. Yeah.
Mike, what was your favorite part about performing in Foss? Jack wants to know.
Just being close to Beto.
The super group, the 90s super group Foss that you were in for a few years.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun playing music with your friends. I mean, right? Like, it's just creating stuff together.
Let me tell a story, and then you come up with a story. I remember, so Mike and Arlo and Cedric and I drove across the United States and a good part of Canada 2 different summers. I can't remember, the summer of '93 and the summer of '94. And we were in a 1987 Plymouth Satellite. Is that
Yes.
correct? Maybe. And all of our gear was stuffed into the back. And only you and I knew how to drive. Arlo and Cedric did not drive. And so we drove the whole distance, and we had this kind of macho thing where, and it had a massive gas tank, like probably 90 gallons or 30 gallons. And it was how long you could drive without taking a break, or how many miles you could go without having to ask Mike to drive. And I remember we were in Canada in the Rockies, and we were coming down a hill, and in order to save gas so I could stay in the driver's seat the longest, I disengaged the gear. It was a manual car, and so we're screaming down this hill.
It was a 3 in the tree. So it had 3 gears that you changed on the steering column.
And we're screaming down this hill at like, I don't know, but screaming for that, we called it the lumber wagon, was probably 85, 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, at 65, it felt like, I don't know.
Yeah, the bolts are rattling, and it's whistling and making all this strange noise. And we're going super, super fast, and I've got it disengaged from the gear. And we're coming down, and it's going too fast, and it's starting to wobble, and I'm trying to put the brakes on, but it's melting the brakes because we're going so fast.
You tried to put it in gear, too.
And then I tried to put it in gear to emergency stop us. And somehow we survived that. But I remember very clearly knowing I was going to kill you and Arlo and Cedric, and that was just going to be a tough way to end. But that Jack, that's one of my memories of touring with Foss with Mike.
Am I right that like it was you and I in the front, and we saw it, we looked at each other, and we're like, it is over.
Yeah.
This is it.
And I remember we didn't
Arlo
say
and
it.
Cedric were asleep in the back, and we were both like, I think this is it, man.
I remember we didn't even have to say it. We just looked at each other, and the look was, we both know that we're going to die, but let's not tell them.
Yeah.
Make sure they're
can't wake them up, because if not,
we don't want to wake them up. But we played in basements, we played in living rooms, we played in church halls, we played in remember playing in Calgary, where we met Leslie Feist, played in a big hall there that was a ton of fun. We played in a place in Seattle, or we tried to, where we moved all our equipment in, and we went to go out and get a hamburger, and then we tried to come back in to play the show, and they ID'd us, and none of us were old enough to actually be in the bar, and so they ended up carting all of our stuff out. We didn't get to play that show in Seattle.
Yeah, we couldn't even go in to take our gear out. Somebody had to bring it unceremoniously, kind of dump it at the entrance.
We'd had all these friends like Carrie Carolyn in Seattle who'd come out to see us, and weren't able to see the show. We have enough compiled footage from those 2 years that we should release a movie, Mike, the Foss years, and get that out. No.
That's really gonna scotch my presidential ambitions.
Yeah. Okay. Very last question. Again from Jack. Do you feel like the ending? Don't tell me what it was, because I haven't seen it. Do you feel like the ending from Uncut Gems was appropriate?
Oh man, what a great movie that was! Yeah, no, I thought it was a great ending. Yeah, those guys, the Safdie brothers. I mean, I don't want to say much, but Adam Sandler is so good. I saw that in Toronto, and I knew it was well reviewed, or like people were talking about it, but it was so intense, and people have been talking about it. Like, it's known for its intensity. But so usually I have, like, during a festival, I'll watch 5 movies. And so I had a movie like 20 minutes after a day. I mean, like, so I had 20 minutes after that, I had a movie, and I was like, I'm just going to go walk around Toronto for the next. So I just walked for like an hour and a half, just kind of decompressing.
It was that disturbing?
No, I mean, it wasn't disturbing.
Or intense.
As much as intense, yeah. I mean, there was disturbing elements, but it was really just like from the get-go, like they're just like, anxiety was here, and then it was just like, I mean, it was just like you were perpetually going up the roller coaster.
Well, just so you know, Jack disagrees with you. He feels like the ending was inappropriate, but we're going to have the two of you on at the same time to talk this through. So Mike, are you up for doing this on Fridays? Maybe kind of giving us a preview into the weekend of what we should be watching. Okay, cool. And then I'll do a better job of asking the question. A bunch of people ask questions. I'll do a better job of turning to those. I just had to go back in time to the Foss World Tour.
And somebody asked where I can watch Uncut Gems. I think Netflix just started streaming it or is about to. So Uncut Gems is available shortly. Also, the Safdie brothers did a movie called Good Time with Robert Pattinson. It's on Netflix right now as well.
Cool. Thanks for the recommendations. Hope you guys continue to be safe and well and healthy.
Yeah, I hear FIFA. I hear my daughter, my 6-year-old, loitering at the door. Fiona, are you out there?
Yeah.
Come in, say hi. Want to say hi to Beto?
Hi, Beto.
Hey, Fiona, how are you?
Good.
Am I still in the band?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
You answered the call. That was impressive.
Yeah. Mike FaceTimed me the other night. Mike and Fiona FaceTimed me, and they were midway into a song, and I picked up the guitar and joined the band. That was some good stuff.
Yeah. So
that should be a movie. The two of you starting a band together.
Well, so good to see you, man. Say hi.
Bye, Fiona. Good to see you.
Say hi to Amy and the kids.
Will do. Adios.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Last bit of news. We're going to have Andy Slavitt on Monday. He ran the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid for President Obama in his second term, and just a really smart guy on all things health, and one of the leaders right now in making sure that everyone has the best information when it comes to COVID-19. And he's literally doing a state-by-state analysis on where we are, country-by-country analysis globally, and is constantly sharing with us best practices and predictions about where this goes and what we can do to make sure that we save as many lives as possible. So Andy Slavitt on Monday, 5:30 Central, 4:30 Mountain. Those are the two time zones in Texas. The rest of the country, you're going to have to figure it out. Use your math. We'll see you. Hope you all have a great weekend. Remember, if you want to sign up for a food bank in Texas or make a donation to a food bank, you can go to poweredbypeople.org and do that. Love you all. Be good to one another. Have a great weekend. Adios.